Colleague from Arizona wishes to engage in a brief colloquy on this point. The amendment that we are offering, a bipartisan amendment dealing with the price of prescription drugs, is a very important amendment. We're going to get our vote on that, but then there is also going to be a vote on an amendment that nullifies it. The poison pill amendment nullifies it. It says you pass the second amendment, means nothing happens, and prescription drug prices keep going through the roof. I just wanted to say quickly that there have been very few bipartisan amendments on the floor of the United States Senate during this health care debate. That's regrettable. This, in fact, is bipartisan. A wide range of 30 senators, including Republicans, John McCain, Chuck Grassley, Olympia Snowe, and so on, support this effort. And the effort is simple: trying to put the brakes on prescription drug prices by giving the American people freedom and the ability to find competition among drug prices where they are sold in other parts of the world for a fraction of what we are charged as American consumers.
Mr. President.
Arizona is recognized.
President, I ask unanimous consent to engage in a colloquy with the senator from North Dakota.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
I think that it's important for us to recognize what the Dorgan Amendment is all about. It's about an estimated, according to the Congressional Budget Office, we love to quote the Congressional Budget Office around here, $100 billion or more in consumer savings. That's what the Dorgan Amendment does. And it cuts the cost of the bill, of the legislation before us, as much as $19.4 billion over 10 years. So here we're always talking about bending the cost curve, saving the money for particularly our seniors who use more prescription drugs than younger Americans, and yet there's opposition. And so I'd like to ask my colleague from North Dakota, one, how long has he been fighting this issue? And two, why in the world do we think that anybody would be opposed to an amendment that would save $100 billion to the consumers of America?
Mr. President, I would say to my colleague from Arizona, we've been working on this for 10 years. 10 years, myself, the senator from Arizona, and others. He knows because he was chairman of the Commerce Committee. We held hearings on this in the committee. Now, the fact is, we have gotten votes on it before, and in each case, the pharmaceutical industry that has a lot of muscle around here has prevailed on those votes with an amendment that is a poison pill amendment saying somebody has to certify with respect to no additional safety risk and so on. These safety issues are completely bogus, absolutely bogus. They have done in Europe for 20 years what we're proposing to do in this country, parallel trading between countries with no issues at all. And what we're trying to do, as the senator from Arizona has indicated, is save the American people $100 billion in the next 10 years because we are charged the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, and there is no justification for it. I want to just show the senator from Arizona one chart, and this is just representative. Nexium. If you happen to take some Nexium, you need Nexium, well, for the same quantity, you pay $424 in the United States. If you were in Spain, you'd pay $36, France, $67, Spain, Great Britain, $41, Germany, $37. Why is it the American consumer has the privilege of paying 10 times the cost for exactly the same drug? Same drug, put in the same bottle, made by the same company, made in the same plant. Justify that.
Could I also ask my friend, has he seen this chart? This chart. This chart shows that the pharmaceutical companies in America have increased wholesale drug cost, which doesn't reflect the retail drug cost, by some 8.7% increase just this year, while the consumer price index, this little line here, inflation, has been minus 1.3%. Now, how in the world do you justify doing that? Then these are lists of the monthly the increases over a year in costs of some of the most popular or much needed prescription drugs. So why would pharmaceutical companies raise costs by some 9% unless they were anticipating some kind of deal that they went into? I don't want to embarrass the senator from North Dakota, but it isn't true. When the President of the United States was a member of this body, he co-sponsored this amendment?
Mr. President, that is the case. The President was a co-sponsor of this legislation when he served here last year. I do want to say as well, when I talked about Nexium, just as an example, the American consumer gets to pay 10 times the cost. Nexium is for acid reflux, probably a condition that'll exist with some after this vote, because my understanding is after 7 days on the floor of the Senate, there's now an arrangement by which the pharmaceutical industry will probably have sufficient votes to beat us once again, which means the American people lose. But I also want to make this point. Anyone who stands up and cites safety and reads the stuff that could come right out of a copying machine for 10 years, understand this. Dr. Peter Rost, former vice president of marketing for Pfizer, and formerly worked in Europe on the parallel trading system, says this, quote, "The biggest argument against reimportation of prescription drugs is safety. What everyone has conveniently forgotten to tell you is that in Europe, reimportation of drugs has been in place for 20 years. It is an insult, in my judgment, to the American people to say, oh, you can make this work in Europe for the benefit of the consumer to get lower prices, but the Americans don't have the capability to make this happen, don't have the capability to manage it. That is absurd, and I think this safety issue is unbelievably bogus."
I might ask my friend from North Dakota again, haven't we seen this movie before? The movie I'm talking about is that we have an amendment or legislation pending before the body or in committee that will allow for drug reimportation, as you just pointed out from that previous chart, in the totally safe manner. And then there is always, thanks to the pharmaceutical lobbyists, of which there are, I believe, 635 pharmaceutical industry lobbyists, a lobbyist and a half for every member of Congress, that there's an amendment passes that then basically prohibits the reimportation of drugs. Haven't we seen this movie before? And apparently now that another deal was made so that they're now going to have sufficient votes to, again, cost the consumers of America $100 billion more in cost for the pharmaceutical drugs. And their representatives are here on the floor ready to tout the virtues of an amendment, which is, we all know, a killer amendment. Let's have no doubt about that.
Mr. President, the senator from Arizona is right that this is Groundhog's Day. At 6 in the morning on pharmaceutical drugs, the clock strikes 6 and the pharmaceutical industry wins. Been doing it for 10 years. We just repeat the day over and over again. My hope is that we won't have to repeat it today. My hope is that after a lot of work on a bipartisan piece of legislation, the American people will have sufficient support here on the floor of the United States Senate to say it is not fair for us to be paying double and triple and 10 times the cost of prescription drugs that others in the world are paying. Mr. President, I wonder if we might be able to yield some time to the senator from Arizona, 5 minutes by consent, unless the senator from Arizona wishes to conclude.
My only conclusion is that what we are seeing here is really what I would ask my friend from North Dakota, what contributes to the enormous cynicism on the part of the American people about the way we do business here. This is a pretty clear-cut issue. As the senator from North Dakota pointed out, it's been around for 10 years. 10 years, we've been trying to ensure that consumers of America would be able to get, at a lower cost, many times life-saving prescription drugs. And the power of the special interests, the power of the lobbyists, the power of campaign contributions are now being manifested in the passage of a killer amendment, which will then prohibit. There's no objective observer who will attest to any other fact than the passage of the follow-on amendment, the side-by-side amendment, will prohibit the reimportation of prescription drugs into this country, which we all know can be done in a safe fashion and could save Americans who are hurting so badly $100 billion a year or more and cut the cost of the legislation before us by $19.4 billion. And to scare people, to say that these drugs that are being reimported are not done in a safe and a manner that is ensure that the American people health is not endangered is, of course, an old saw and an old movie that we have seen before. It's regrettable. it's really regrettable that the special interests again prevail and the power of the pharmaceutical lobby. But I also want to say, finally, there are many traits that the senator from North Dakota has that I admire. One of them is his tenacity. And I want to assure him that that I will be by his side as we go back again and again on this issue until justice and fairness is done and we defeat the special interests of the pharmaceutical industry, which have taken over the White House and will take over this vote that will go at 6 o'clock. It's not one of the most admirable chapters in the history of the United States Senate or the United States government.
Mr. President, I was going to yield 5 minutes next to the senator from Iowa, but if there is someone that wishes to go prior to the senator from Iowa, I would ask consent that they follow. Is it Senator Wattenberg seeking recognition? If so, I would ask consent that the senator from Iowa be recognized for 5 minutes following that presentation. Let me recognize the senator from Iowa for 5 minutes.